Hi, folks. I'm Scott Giles, a certified consulting hypnotist and life coach. And I do these short videos every Saturday at 2:30 Central Time. They're about 10 minutes long, and I touch upon some aspect of hypnotism, typically medical hypnotism, as that's what I'm best known for, but life coaching and other things of interest. Today, I want to talk about how not to take responsibility for the feelings of others. And, we all should accept responsibility for our behavior towards others. We should keep our word. We should meet our obligations, of course. But some people do a flip on this, and they want to hold you responsible for how they feel. They hold you accountable for themselves. As a parish minister, and I was one for 13 years before making my jump into community ministry, which is what my hypnosis work is considered today, this was a total pain in the tail because you saw it all the time. People expected their minister not to make them feel uncomfortable. So if you did something that made someone feel uncomfortable, that was your fault. You were responsible for making that person unhappy. One day I was preaching a sermon on the Sermon on the Mount. And in that sermon, Jesus of Nazareth makes a number of very extreme statements, like if your eye offends you, pluck it out. If your arm offends you, cut it off. And yet there were no blind, handless people among the disciples. So what's going on with that kind of extreme statement? Well, Jesus of Nazareth did not speak Hebrew or Greek. He spoke Aramaic, which was a transitional language as Hebrew was kind of dying out and Greek was being phased in as the language of the upper class. There's a place in Scripture when Jesus is on the cross and he says, Eloi, Eloi, lama sabachthani, my God, why have you forsaken me? But that's not Hebrew and it's not Greek, it's Aramaic. Aramaic is a fairly crude language and it doesn't have punctuation. So an Aramaic speaker had no way to express emphasis. And as a result of that, the Aramaic speaker would exaggerate when they were speaking. They would deliberately put a powerful spin on what they said. So when Jesus said, close the, Jesus said, cut off your arm, pluck out your eyes, he didn't mean that literally. He was using hyperbole, exaggeration, to make it clear that we should make a serious effort to behave in a moral way. So I said this in the sermon, and this guy came up to me and he was furious. You have shaken my faith in the Almighty, and what are you going to do about it? Well, nothing. I mean, if a few words from little old me is sufficient to shake your faith in the Almighty, your faith must be pretty shaky indeed. And it's my job as a minister, as a speaker, to speak the truth as I see it. I'm not responsible for how others feel about that. And did it cause a stir in the congregation. People often will go around not doing the right thing because they're afraid that if they do that, someone's feelings are going to get hurt. Which is why parish ministers often feel they get out of school, get into a church, and they have to roll over and play dead because they can't get anything done. People will say, well, she's really messing up, but we don't have the heart to kick her off the committee. Or, his behavior is completely over the top, but if we confronted him, it would just devastate him. So they let these people continue to act out or mess up, and the church has problems. Now, the sentiment of why you might hold yourself responsible for why someone else feels is certainly good-hearted. We don't want to hurt the feelings of other people needlessly. That's why we develop things like the white lie, a fib that you tell to avoid hurting someone, just to be kind. So if your significant other asks if a new expensive piece of clothing looks attractive on them, there's really only one appropriate answer, and it may not be the literal truth. And I get that. But that way lies madness if taken too far. There is, in my opinion, there is no stress more toxic than trying to control something you can't control. And you can't control the feelings of others. There is no situation more abusive than being among people who hold you responsible for things you can't control. Many congregations do this, but so do a lot of workplaces. Upper management is happy to assign responsibility, but not resources or authority. And you're set up to fail, and yet you don't have any way of proceeding with that because you can't control what happens. It's common in relationships too. Many romantic relationships that I've seen over the years go right off the rails because one party holds the other responsible for how the first party feels. I feel so bad. It must be your fault. Now, there's only one cure for this behavior, and that's to stop it. To stop holding others accountable for how you feel, yes, and also for not holding yourself accountable for how someone else feels. Get into the mental habit of correcting that cognitive mistake whenever you notice that you're making it. And it's important that you do that because there are people who make holding you responsible for how they feel their major method of operation. And they go through life slyly manipulating others, betting that no one's going to call them to account. Because if they did, well, then their precious little feeling would get hurt, and no one's going to do that. There is a wonderful poem by John Ciardi, a famous classical scholar, called In Place of a Curse. And I've got it here. I'm going to read it to you. I like this poem so much that I actually have it in my journal, so it's with me whenever I have my journal with me. Here it goes. At the next vacancy for God, if I am elected, I shall forgive last the delicately wounded who, having been slugged no harder than anyone else, never got up again, neither to fight back nor to finger their jaws in painful admiration. They who are wholly broken, and they in whom mercy is understanding, I shall embrace at once and lead to pillows in heaven. But they who are the meek by trade, baiting the best of their betters with the extortions of a mock helplessness, I shall take last to love and never wholly. Let them all into heaven, I abolish hell, but let it be read over them as they enter. Beware the calculations of the meek, who gambled nothing, gave nothing, and could never receive enough. That's an important poem for me in my own story when I learned that there were people like that, and I needed to stop falling for their con and holding myself accountable for their feelings. I suggest you do the same. Thank you very much for your attention. As always, I'll be back next week, same time, with another short talk. I'm going to talk about cancer. I'm well known for my work in oncology, so I'm going to share some things that I've learned about cancer, not scientific things, but spiritual and emotional things over my decades of work with this particular cohort of people. Some of them are among the bravest people I've ever met, and I'm going to share some of the valor that I've seen with them. So tune in if you're interested. As always, if you want to know how my work might be helpful to you, feel free to reach out. Thank you.